Just wanted to make sure it works. So then when Gachi comes, it's already set.
obeisance to my guru and protector, Manjushri, who holds to his heart a scriptural text symbolic of the seeing all things as they are, whose understanding shines forth as the sun, unclouded by defilements or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the patient love of a father for his only son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You who drag and thunder proclamation of the Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma. Whose powerful sword of wisdom hews down suffering wherever its sprouts appear, with the darkness of all ignorance. Whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages, achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. Manjushri, O loving one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing our minds, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. To the perfection of wisdom, indescribable by words and thoughts, which does not arise and does not cease in nature like space, whose objects belong to the individual subject's awareness, the prostrate to the mother of the conquerors of the 3 times. Thus did I hear at one time that Bhagavan was dwelling on a massive Vulture's mountain, Gandhradagriha, together with a great community of monks and a community of bodhisattvas. At that time, Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration of the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Haryavalokiteshvara, upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. And to the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Haryavalokiteshvara: how should any son of a lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Haryavalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage, a daughter of the lineage, who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom, should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, and phenomena are emptiness without characteristics, unproduced, unceased, unless not without saying, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, compositional factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no scent, no touch, no phenomenon. There is no element, so often including no mind element, no consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, so often including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, no origination, cessation, and path. There is no result of wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, without obstruction, without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwelt the 3 times also manifested completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment, reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Haryavalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of lineage, it is like that. It is like that, one should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Bhagavatas rejoice. The Bhagavad we have spoken, the Bhagavad Shariputra, Bodhisattva Mahasattva Haryavalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, human asuras, and others, which are Vidura and namely praise that spoken by the Bhagavan. I prostrate to the gathering of the kings and the 3 chakras who abide in the Galilean space by your powers of clairvoyance and magic illumination. Look after practitioners like a mother her child. Maraya Bedaya Gare Gori Soha. Stage beam jewels, blessed in the power of truth, may all inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be dispelled, may they be pacified. Let's see pacified, Shantam Kodare Soha. May all negative forces that cause the Dharma be completely pacified. To the 80,000 obstacles be pacified. Separated from problems and harmful conditions, the Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma. May the auspiciousness and perfect happiness here right now. The foundation of all qualities, the kind and venerable Guru. Quick devotion to him is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. Understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is greatly meaningful and is difficult to and please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly day and night takes its essence. This life is impermanent as a water bubble, remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follows. The condition in this may always to be careful to abandon the slightest negativities from all virtuous deeds. Seeking desire pleasures, the door to all suffering, the uncertain and cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Let pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The teachings of keeping the party moksha vows, please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. This is the Father, the sea of stars, all mother migratory beings. Please bless me to see this, train the supreme bodhicitta, and bear the responsibility of freeing migratory beings. If I develop only a bodhicitta, but I don't practice the 3 types of morality, I will not be enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the bodhisattva vows to get energy. Once I have pacified distractions, the wrong objects, and correctly analyze the meaning of reality, please bless me with a no-mind stream, the unified path of combining and special insight. Having become a pure vessel by training in the general path, please bless me to the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the 2 attainments is keeping pure vows and samaya. As I become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. Then having realized the importance of the 2 stages, the essence of Vajrayana, by practicing the Jini, giving up the 4 sessions, please bless me to the teachings of the Holy Guru. Likewise, gives the joy of the noble path and the spiritual friendship practice that have long lives. Please bless me to completely all outer and inner hindrances. Never separated perfect the Gurus, may we know the magnificent Dharma. The qualities, the stages and paths attain the state of Vajradhara. Sangi churam sugi chudam nyotru baludani kapsuchi tagi chirungi besunamgi jola bendu sangi rubayu sangi churam sugi chudam nyotru baludani kapsuchi tagi chirungi besunamgi Jola benches, Nagiru Bajo, Zange, Churam Zagi Shunam Ha Shade Bade Dadi Gemsuchi Dagi Chiri Gibe Sunam Ki Chula Bendu Sangi Trubashu. Okay. It's been a couple of weeks. Power events last week. So we're still talking about karma. I've been teaching lecture about this too because he's studying Tendril now. You study in the 7th year. And then again in the 8th year when you study about the Kunji, the Abhisamaya Alamkara, that's not right. Alaya Vijnana, then you also study about quite a bit about karma. And then here and there other places. And then we're about to start actually on this Sunday, starting talking about the 4th chapter of Abhidhammakosha, which is also about karma. So it comes up quite a bit in the program. But I shouldn't say but. Really, all of the points in here come up. Yeah, I read through this whole section quite a bit when we were in the Tendro, the 12 links dependent origination, studying about karma. But even if you don't read it, all of the main points are talked about. Different kinds of karma, the divisions, different kinds of virtue and non-virtue. So that's, as you can see, people ask, why don't we study Lam Rim here at Sarah? But that's not quite right, because we study all of these points. There are actually quite a bit more details in there and here. It's just that it's put in the Lam Rim into a particular streamlined, kind of concise way that's clear for how to practice it. But it's not like the points are new to us. So, although people sometimes think the Lam Rim is very big, it's a long version, it's actually quite short compared to the way that we study it here, but that makes sense. We're studying for 20 years, so 700 pages isn't really that much, is it? But it's a good supplement because it has a lot of advice for practice from Tsongkhapa. He puts it in his own order of how you can use this for practice. So anyway, we've gotten to the main points. Right? We finished. Right, if we can just go back to the beginning of the section of karma, we don't have to do everything, but everything in the text. But anyway, so it has two sections, right? The contemplation on karma. It has the general contemplation and then the specific contemplation. There's three sections, and then having contemplated, then how to engage in the right actions and abandon the wrong actions. It's quite long, isn't it? Looks like it's about 40 pages. And then the first one, the general presentation, and how to think about karma, actual way to think about karma in a general sense, and then dividing it and contemplating individually. So that division then again has 10 non-virtues, that's the main 10 paths of action, which include the virtues also. And then the karma, ascertaining the karma and its results. So we're in that section now. And then that section itself has thinking about black karma, which is negative karma, and then white karmas. And then another division of karma. Right? So the black karma has the actual paths of black karma, and then the differences in terms of heaviness and lightness, which is what we're in that section. And then the results, teaching about the results. So then heaviness and lightness has the general, the heaviness and lightness of the 10 non-virtues. And then as a side, auxiliary subject, condensing karma in terms of what is especially heavy karma, and then teaching about that. So another way of understanding it, really. So this section, Sharla Toktan de Belegi Dude, Telahava or Tempa Lashi, there's 4 sections. So it doesn't list them here actually, but it's Shingi Gone Tok Chewa. So there's the 4 ways that the karma is heavier. Right? Shingdan Sampe Kepra Le. Yomo Ratan, Drapo Tang, Shingdan Sampe Kepra Le. It is in Zo, in the Abhidharma. So the first is the heaviness in terms of the field, meaning the object, right? And then heaviness in terms of the den, the basis. I think that has to do with the person who does it. Right? And then we'll get there. And then heaviness in terms of the object. So meaning the thing you give, right? So not obviously the object doesn't mean we already have the shing is the object, the field, but here is the object like what you give, right? So the den I'm seeing here, the den has to do with your what vows you've taken, right? So that affects how strong the karma is. And then finally, heaviness in terms of the intention, sampa. Okay, so first, in terms of the field of the karma. So here, this is in the section on negative karma, nakbole, but actually describes both of them. It talks about both positive and negative. So here are particularly heavy fields. So Kunchok Sum, 3 joules, and then Lama, your Lama, Lama Tang Draw, so somebody who's like your Lama. And then Pama, your parents, and then Lasopade, Dedalani, Sambashukdrapo Meching, even though you don't have a very strong intention. Meching Pinu Chumushik Chekyong, and then even if it's a small harm or benefit to them. Sonamtang, Kanamatawa Chewi Churu. So that's a very heavy it's a merit or kanamatoa, wrongdoing. Right? There's an interesting story we have in one of the books in the library. It's sort of surprising, actually, if you think about it, but it's no longer here in this section. We just moved the books out yesterday. No more books in the temple. Now they're in the new library. Otherwise, I'd point to it. Sons of the Buddha is the name of the book. It's a book about 3 Thai monks. So the 3 Thai monks are Buddhadasa, Panyan, I forget the second one's name. What is Pan? I don't know. And then the third one is Junyan. This is the story of Ajahn Junyan. Ajahn is Gyalong, right? So anyway, it's quite an interesting story in general. I'd recommend that book. It's quite a lot of details you get up on a monk's life that you wouldn't just get from reading a sutra or reading a philosophical text. But anyway, he before he was a monk, he did quite a bit of negative actions, not really heavy things like he didn't kill anyone, but he talks about, for example, shooting a monkey, things like that. But one of the things he says when he was a young boy, he saw his mother. I forget exactly how it happened, but basically he ran up to her to hug her, and she didn't see him coming, and he ran right into her stomach and actually hurt her quite a bit. I mean, seriously injured. It wasn't even intentional. It seemed like he was just trying to hug his mother. But he says that later, when he was a monk and he was meditating one day, then he had this, all of a sudden, like this sensation. I don't remember the sensation he mentions, but something like he was burning or something like that. And he had the sense that he remembered that experience, and he was purifying the very heavy negative karma that he accumulated by doing that, because it was his mother, so such heavy negative karma. So, as I say, it's a bit interesting that it's not even intentional, but as we'll see here, there's different karma. There's always karma created in any action we do, right? So sometimes people say, well, there's nothing done if you didn't have any intention, but there's still something done, and you had some intention to do something, right? So you have to be mindful of your actions, whatever you do. As I've said, if you really don't want to harm anything, then you probably shouldn't get in the vehicle. Because you know if you're going to get in a car that you're going to kill a lot of bugs. That's why Lama Zopa Rinpoche said when he was in a car, he would just do prayers the whole time, because all the bugs that are getting killed, he would put all the mantras in the windshield and everything. Right? So that's just the effect. We can't help that living in the world, but it happens. So we have to be careful. And even if it's your parents, it's very strong karma. Right? It says in also so. Papa Minyam Pamatan, I think I said this last time. Papa Minyam Pamatan, Nebatani Chamawa, Keta de Sempala, Unisha de Mipian. So, although they're not Arya beings, right, then the results of the yuns, the gifts that you give to your parents, to a sick person, to a teacher of Dharma, to a bodhisattva in his last existence, then it's immeasurable. Right? So you might say, well, a bodhisattva in his last existence, that's an Arya being, but actually not in the chart, in the Vaibhashika system, they don't accept that. They say that the bodhisattva is not an Arya being until the night of enlightenment goes through the whole path at once. It's different if you study you'll study the Madhyamaka system first in 30 of the program. Anyway, so those are particularly heavy actions done to those particular beings. So then it says in Trempa Nirjak So no, it's just saying Deang Tempa Nirshak Lejuma Tapu Day. So as it says in the sutra on the establishment of mindfulness, right? Jikidu Sange Tang Chi Tang Gendun Da Le Ni Chumushik Lam Na Yang Chempo Girde. So if you take something, meaning steal something, from the Buddha, the Dharma, or the Sangha, even if it's very small, it will become very large. So Sange, but then it says Sange Tang Chi Tang Gendun Gi Majimper Langwa Derak Kilekyang. So from that stealing from the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, Risu Tumbar Lar Puna. So it says if you give back something similar to them, Sangetang Chugini Da Paragurla. And so the thing that what you've done in relation to the Buddha and to the Dharma, it will purify it by giving something similar back. But again, so but if stealing from the Sangha, so you will not purify it such that you don't experience any feeling as a result, meaning a suffering feeling. Because it's a very heavy field. What's interesting, I have a note here, of course, it's implying that the Sangha is heavier than the Buddha and the Dharma. Maybe you could say it's heavier in as much as they don't have the requisites. The Buddha has plenty, so it doesn't attach to it. Like there's some debate in the Vinaya whether stealing from the Buddha is actually a defeat, because the Buddha doesn't have any sense of ownership, and the person has to have a sense of ownership. Tsonawa, who's the author that I've mentioned, the text that we read in Vinaya, he says it is a defeat. Yeah. He says it is a defeat, but then Gao Gendendrip, the first Dalai Lama, says it's not. Right? So there's some question about that. I think it's the other way around. I was just trying to remember. I think anyway, it doesn't matter too much to you, but I think it's Sonawa says it's not, and then Gao Gendendrip says it is, because he gives the reasoning that if the point is, if you have the thought, if you consider that thinking it's mine is based upon having self-grasping on it, right? You know, the sense of inherent self, right? Then that's not the meaning behind what it means to think it's mine, right? It just means that they have the sense of an ownership. So it doesn't mean that they have a sense of an inherent self. But anyway, so my point is, it seems like maybe it's not as heavy because it doesn't really harm the Buddha, right? And the Dharma is an inanimate object, so I guess it doesn't harm the Dharma, although it's obviously still not good to steal from the Dharma, which would mean stealing text and so forth, which is probably belongs to somebody, right? But stealing from the Sangha is saying is this very heavy action. Maybe the Sangha don't have the requisites, and also you're stealing from more people than just one. So anyway, Gede shedu do we go shikna chikni Gede shedu do we go shikni semchini or chempertumba. So he's saying if you put something in your mouth, right, something that you stole from them, is that what it's saying? Then we will fall into the greatest hell. Shedu do we go shikna. Or it's something missing. Shall we do it go? To check that actually. Yeah, so it's something that's means of sustenance for the community. Right? So shall do we go means something they're going to put in their mouth. Shall they go cheek my enemy? If it's not a means of sustenance, de nangi de Nagi bar namepe kor munak chempolo sopakiwaguro. Okay, so it's not as bad. So when it said the great hell, it's saying it was Avicii hell, right? The Narme. And now it's saying if it's not something that is there, that was for the requisite, then you won't fall into Narme. You'll fall into the surrounding hell. Not the surrounding hells, but the immediately surrounding hell that surrounds Avicii, which is the Munak Chempel, the great blackness, the great darkness. So not pleasant, and La Sokpa, so other places, for example. So the point is, it's considered very heavy to do so. She sumso. And then Tsongkhapa clarifies, so kepardu, ken ginigidze dapaham, metokam, drebu tsam shi tsulchegichina. So this is not stealing, this is if a person who has broken ethics, which means a monk who has broken ethics in this case. If they make use of something, an object of the Sangha, such as dhammas or petal, like a petal of a flower, or a flower, or a fruit, just one, then they will fall into the hells, right? I think I've mentioned this before, that there's this in the Vinaya about the 5 kinds of use, right? So if you're an arhat and you can use the Sangha's requisites with the thought that it's mine. Of course, you don't have a thought of mine, but the point is you could think it's a sense of ownership. If you're a trainee, which means that you're actually an Arya being who's not an arhat, then you can use it in the sense of taking and giving. You can think that I'm accepting from the sponsor. And then if you're an ordinary monk who's practicing well or making effort, then you have the sense of taking it with permission. Right? So you take it with the Buddha gave you permission to take it for the purpose of your sustaining your practice. But if you're a lazy monk, then you take it like on loan. So you have to pay it back in the next life because you didn't fulfill your part in the deal. The abbot has mentioned that several times. Our current abbot, he brings that up quite a bit. But then it also says, if you're a monk of broken ethics, then you use it. It's like pouring hot embers in your mouth, right? So that's the analogy here. So the point is, if you're a monk of broken ethics, it's better you disrobe. When they say broken ethics, they mean a monk who's committed a defeat. So you have committed a defeat and you hide it. So you're not suitable to be a monk anymore. But if you continue to take the requisites. And then Gyala Yuringwone Tarion. I should mention in case you're worried, right? So that is what it means, right? It doesn't mean like you're a monk who occasionally eats in the evening or something that you can't, then you broke your vows, so you can't use requisites. You don't have to be so uptight about it. The point is that if you really have broken ethics, but also the other point about the lazy monks is that you should make effort. You should be attentive and mindful of conscientious, really, of using your time well, so that you're not just wasting. You should think everything you're doing is being supported. That's one of the 10 contemplations of a monk, right? My very life is supported by the generosity of others, right? On my requisites, everything I'm using. So always contemplate on that, and not just waste the requisites, but not waste your time, because people are making the offerings with the thought that you're practicing. If you're just using your time in like a person who's not a monk, then what's the purpose of being a monk? So then, Gyala Yurimpo Gomne Tarihan. So then it's saying, if after a long time you finally are free of that hell, Dok Gompo Ro Kamdu Dundro Dok Gompa Ro Kamdu Dundro Kalak Mepartam Ida Lama Kalak Meperkede. So be born is saying in a wilderness area. Ro Kam is, I guess, saying like with dry corpses. And as an animal in a wilderness area with dry corpses, without an animal without arms or legs, right? And then ira lawa kalame perkede, you'll be born as also as a hungry ghost without arms or legs, and that there's an interesting story in the book Reincarnation and Biology. I've mentioned that. Definitely recommend to read that if you ever have time. I didn't think I would, because it's long, but when we finally studied past and future lives in the Pramana or Namdra. That was during the lockdown, so I had plenty of extra time. We weren't even eating together because we were all staying apart from each other. So I read that. It's a 2,000-page book, right? With two volumes. Just read through all those stories of the people, of the research into reincarnation. So one of the first things he tells about, he says that he gives it as an example of something that actually he does not consider conclusive evidence. But he says he doesn't know really what happened. There was a baby born, I think in India. I think it was in India, without any arms or legs, right? And he's had a short life, a lot of suffering, and then passed away. But he researched it. I think he was there before the baby died, and he was interviewing the parents, and I can't remember exactly how he ended up getting invited there, because it wasn't reported as a case of reincarnation, which is usually why he would be investigating it. But he asked them, "Did you ever know anybody that had their arms or legs cut off?" And it turns out, yes, they had actually murdered somebody by cutting off his arms and legs some time ago, thrown him in the river or something like that. So what happened there, we don't really know. But he points that out in that case, that there's a lot of confusing evidence. I can't remember all the details of it. But he suggests he thinks actually it might be a case of maternal impression, which is another phenomenon that he's investigated more. You heard of this? No? Yeah, it's actually, this is reported not that infrequently, but it's not well documented because they don't understand it. Right? It was actually it was better documented in the 19th century, before there was an understanding of the separation between the womb and the fetus and the mother. Because the point is that it was actually conceivable that something could happen like this, but once they discovered that it was impossible, they stopped documenting it because it didn't make any sense. So anyway, what maternal impression is when the mother has a very strong imprint in her mind, and it impresses upon the child. So some of the common cases seem to be that, like, the mother watches somebody getting shot while they're pregnant with the child. And then the child is born with a birthmark that's corresponding to the person who was shot. It's like the mother has this very intense experience of fear, and it imprints on the child. So he actually thought that case was, in his speculation, or his conjecture was that was what was going on. But anyway, the point here, the point of bringing that up, I suppose, is that we have to think about, as I've said, it's just listed in the Lam Rim. This happened. This is the result of this or that. It's really good to think about how does that actually work. Right? I remember that when we were in debate one time, the monk from the class below me is a really serious monk, and really nice to see that he really takes debate seriously. He's not interested in just winning debate, even though he's very good. He really wants to understand the teachings, and so he was debating with me one night after we break up, you sometimes talk with the people below in class below you. And he just asked me very pointedly. It was right when they were starting to study the Four Noble Truths, and we had studied it the year before. And he asked, "How does it make any sense? Why does one action you do then get experienced in the next life? What is the reasoning behind that?" Right? I didn't have a really good answer. Right? But it's said to be it's not a very hidden phenomenon. I mentioned that. So how does that actually work? You have to think about how it would be a mechanism, but even if there is a mechanism, which is a hard thing to posit, why does it have to be that way and not some other way? So you have to look at different phenomena and what could make it happen that way. Why would somebody who it doesn't say cut off someone's legs here, actually it just talks about somebody who's a bad monk and then takes community requisites. They're born with no arms and legs. What functions to create that? Right? It has to do with the mind, essentially. Right? And all the Buddhist schools, they have their own explanation of why that happens. That's one of the main points of division, or just main points of of different, there's this opinion within the different Buddhist schools. How does karma work? So anyway, we won't get into that more now. Lo mompor dungal nyawala supengimik chewar. So there's also the great fault that for many years you'll experience suffering as a result of that. So the Nime Ningpole in the sutra on the essence of the sun, which is one of the Prajna Paramita sutras. Oh, it says that in that sutra, that's all. It doesn't give the quotation. Shenyang, Gendun Tang Gelo Lang Nipa Metok Supa Tsaoyang, Rangi Chapatang, Kim Lateratang, Kim Pe Long Chu de Miron Wasung Jing, Kanabatawayan Shinduche. So that also, if there's something that's been dedicated to the Sangha and to a particular monk, such as just a flower, even just a flower, it says, then if you use it yourself, or you give it to a layperson, or it's saying it's unsuitable. It's unsuitable to do those things, and it's unsuitable for a layperson to make use of it. It said that, and then it also becomes a very heavy wrongdoing. Now, I think when it says dedicated, I mean, you have to think about the degree of dedication. Sometimes, it's like you think, should I give it or not? You decide not to. Well, it's a little different than if you actually made the decision to give it, or if somebody else dedicated. That's often kind of the point. Like in the Vinaya, is the story of Nyega, right? Upananda, who was one of the misbehaving monks. There's the story of the sponsor wanted to give a whole offering to the whole sangha, and he said, "Well, I practice better than there are other monks. Why don't you just give it to me, not everyone else? Not waste it on the whole sangha. You should just give it all to me." So he did that. So the thing is that it was intended to be given to the whole sangha, but it ended up going into the hands of one person. But here it's talking about giving it to lay people. There's also some question about that, right? About how far do you take that? I was told that in Tibet they were very strict to the point, really of superstition. I don't mean to criticize, but it seems maybe it was a bit extreme, because I've heard when they first came to India, they still were carrying a lot of these ideas that they had. So when they had the food at the Dratsa in the 1960s or in Boksa in the 1970s when they started here, they said that they would discourage anyone from giving the food to dogs after they ate. Said they'll burn their stomach because it's sangha food. Right? But eventually, as you see nowadays, that's quite the opposite. Probably got a lot of dogs here. But yeah, eventually they figured out that at least they didn't see that happen. But I think the point is that it's discarded food at that point, right? It's not a problem to give the leftover. But it is something to think about, that if the food is offered for the sangha, so that's why they're very careful about who does and does not take the monastery food, right? So if you're not on the roll of the monastery, you shouldn't just go and take the food. If you're on Korshak, right? If you get permission to leave the monastery, that means you're no longer under the discipline, but it also means you no longer have permission to take the food. So you're not allowed to just go and take the food, because you think that it's given to the monastery, and then it's based on their decision of who is suitable to take it, because they're acting on behalf of the sponsor. Then, that's we have to respect. So what do we do when we have lay visitors and so forth? I mean, nowadays, again, they do give, like they'll always give at the dracha, when they have the sponsor, they'll always give them food. And we have lay visitors in our house, we give them food. I think you have to weigh the different sides of it. People wouldn't like it very much if you weren't nice, and it's nice to be generous to people, and we have plenty of food these days. It's not like we're starving. But anyway, this is how they were thinking about it previously. So I think also it depends on in what context, right? So if it becomes an obstacle to practicing generosity, it's like, I'm a monk, I can't give to anyone, I'll just hoard everything for myself. then that might actually be an obstacle to your bodhisattva practice. But if it's thought of as that for example, you're in charge of distributing the monastery funds, then you have to be very careful, because it's not about me, it's about I'm acting on behalf of the whole community, and then if I just squander the funds and give them away to lay people. But as I've often said, I think nowadays also there's the issue of the monastery being significantly better developed than the local villages, right? So, and His Holiness has commented on that many times now when he comes down here, since the monastery is quite a bit more wealthy than the local people. So it seems like he feels that it would be good to, it doesn't mean to give away all the monastery funds to them, but just to do something to for them, give them teachings, give them support in whatever way they need.
At the hospital, for example.
Yeah, the hospital, it's good that they do that. Actually, I think it's very good that they do allow lay people to come into the hospital, local Indian people. So that kind of thing, yeah, it's a good practice. Because it's not a big part of the Tibetan tradition, as mentioned. I mean, even in the Buddhist tradition in general, His Holiness always says that when you have a Christian monastery, you'll soon have schools and hospitals erected nearby. But when there's a Buddhist monastery, there's some of the tradition. But he feels it would be good that happened more. So, Puji Longpo Dagi Su Rangi Ala Tupa Le. This is from that sutra, the essence of the sun. So he's saying, even if with sharp knives and so forth, all of your limbs were cut off, it's no big deal. But Genden Dala Muzinpa Kimpa Namla Jinmicha, but things that are already been dedicated to the Sangha, don't give them to the lay people. Right? I have a note here, so should we not give kunge to beggars? It's a difficult question, really. And then Meje Bara Tabuhi Chagitulum Supale. So even if your body is cut apart with sharp burning spears, I think tulum, with the flames. Or sorry, yeah. Anyway, they get the point. Whatever the mechanism is. Gendin dale, gambeni gendugile lomiche. So he's saying, whatever has been come from the Sangha, then other than the Sangha, don't make use of it. Don't have someone else use it. Lumpo tani drawen me langwachede subale. Right, so a fire that's similar to the Mount Meru, even if that langwachede, even if you just pick that up, it's no problem. Langwachede zupale. Yeah. And then if you pick it up and eat it, it's like pick it up and eat the fire. Kimpar Gurwe Gendungi Mongchapani Michao. So one who has become a layperson, it could mean just like a monk who's disrobed, or it could just mean Chimpa Gurpa, and like often you see in literary Tibetan, one who has become just means one who is. So somebody who is a layperson, if they make use of the Sangha requisites, they shouldn't do that. Tamshed Yumor Chepatang Seljing Tengdu Tekpale, so then it's okay, it's no problem if everybody beats you with sticks, or if they impale you on a spear. Or Seljing really means like, how do you say? In old times when they used to put people out on not on a spear, but what's the word?
A stake.
Stake, yeah, I guess a stake. Then like they just pierce through their whole body. That's the idea. Seljing. They don't do that too much anymore, unfortunately. But in medieval times, that was a punishment. So Kempa de Girpe Gendugi Longchupani Michao. So same word here. So the one who has become a layperson should not make use of the Sangha requisites. Mede Dagi Gangwahi Nekang Derni Shupale. So if you stay in a place that's completely consumed by fire, it's no big deal. But Kimpe Gendun Nekangdu but do not stay the night in the dwelling of the Sangha, if you're a layperson. Right, again, we have laypersons staying here now, right? Hope we're not putting him in the fire. But again, I think it's a very common thing that they host people here, but we have to think about in what regard they're doing it, right? If you host them as a volunteer, which is what we're doing, it's very different. Or during His Holiness' teachings, we host as an act of generosity to have people stay here. But if it's that money has been offered to the Sangha for the Sangha requisites, but then we're just actually just like making it like a home for lay people and offering like a guest house or something for them, then that's not really appropriate. But we have to look at what's the context. So are they actually coming in out of faith, or just becoming like inhabited by lay people? There's one of the dreams of King Tripti. I don't know his name in Sanskrit. It says in Tibetan Tripti. It's after the Buddha passed away, there was a king who had 10 dreams, it said, and then they were prophetic of some of the things that were going to happen as like a generation of the Sangha. So one of the dreams was that there were thieves. It was thieves staying in. I think it's just the thieves were staying in the monastery is the point. Dream. But anyway, the point of the dream was that there were monks staying in the monastery who had broken their vows, I think. Or no, it was just lay people staying in the monastery, I think was what it was. That's what it made me think of it. That's what the dream was supposed to be, that eventually there would be monasteries, but they would just be inhabited by lay people. What? Sheso. Genegi nane kyang, tanda sempe ganzag ni, ge mi ge shing shindu top chere. So he's saying among Sangha, then the very heavy field, right, the very, very field for virtue or non-virtue, is a monk who is a bodhisattva. So depe top kepala jupe chakye godole. And as they always say in the monastery, you never know who is it if it's not a bodhisattva, right? So it's best to treat everyone with respect. So it says in the sutra on the mudra of entering into generating the power of faith. It's the long name. So Gashik Turne Chokchu Semshin Tamche Sunra Buddha to Jupa Way. So somebody even more so than somebody who gets angry at all sentient beings in all the 10 directions and puts them all into a dark jail cell. Trude Jangzemla Gyatki Chokte, somebody who out of anger turns their back on a bodhisattva. Dukne Morrongwa de Tahu. So it's even more inappropriate. So see it as even more inappropriate. She Serna Dikchen Tramepa Kepatam. Saying so Tsongkhapa is saying the meaning is that the non-virtue accumulated, the dikpa, is countlessly more so. Zambolingi semshin tam jigi, sajsen tam jigi, dopatamche chopawe kyang, so even more so than somebody who steals all of the possessions of all the sentient beings in the world. Jangzem gaya rola, mena, so same thing as said before, that if you criticize a bodhisattva, it's before, meaning it's that much more serious. Chudin kanke lungi chema niba shipatam sepale, so also even more so than destroying or burning as many stupas as there are grains of sand in the river Ganges. Tekpa chempul nibe jangzemla nusentang kontro keching. And this is so Tsongkhapa is saying it was explained in the sutra to be the same if you then do if you to a bodhisattva who has faith in the Mahayana or has aspiration for the Mahayana, if you get a mind to harm or generate anger and then speak negative, unpleasant words to them. Sumpatam, nipatam mangipa gajupe chake dole. And also in the sutra, this is a mudra, another mudra sutra, on the mudra of entering into the definitive and then non-definitive. Chokchu semchen digi mi chungwa la, jambe semgi mi lar kewatang. It's pretty amazing. Saying if in all the sentient beings in the 10 directions, if you were to pluck out their eyes, but then with a mind of love, you would regenerate their eyes. So semchen amanam sunra ne tunde koragyuram sampe dewala kupa way. And then after that, saying angamanam, so all those sentient beings who you gave them eyesight again, if you were to release them from prison and then put them in the state of a wheel turning king, which wheel turning king is understood to be the greatest merit of a human being, that's the idea. Or in the happiness of Brahma, so in the God realm, form realm. Rimbatar, so he's saying of all those things, if you look at a bodhisattva with faith, or if you look at them with lucidity, which means like a sense of awe in them, or like wishing, that's great, that's what an amazing thing. Wishing, and you wish to be like that, and you praise them. It's saying you get such greater inconceivable merit from doing so. So also in the sutra on the definitive, great, peaceful magic, miracle is a better word. Zambolengi semchen tam cheki sokche dam dopatam che tropale. So more so than killing all the sentient beings in the world, or stealing all of their possessions. Jamzengi tana tundro la sen chang chimpe gewala barche chena. So if just for a moment you make an obstacle to a bodhisattva, even just trying to give a small bit of food to an animal, that much more negative karma. Ne dila shindu sapar chao. So Kalapa is saying we should be very careful at this point. Now, as we see, I mean, as I've often said, the sutras, the Mahayana sutras are often quite hyperbolic, as you can see here, about a lot of things. So rather than having to think it's exactly literal, you have to calculate, well, the merit is how many trillion times more this or that. The point is that you think about it, it's a very heavy action to do that. Right? Somebody who is really sincerely trying to help people and you obstruct what they're doing, it's very heavy. So whether it's exactly as it's described here, the point is we have to be thoughtful of the consequences of our actions and then think about we never really know actually somebody's motivation, so we have to be careful with everybody, really. So tengi gone topchewani. So that was about the shing, the field, the person, right? So next we have the tengi gone. So the basics, which I said it's talking about vows, I think. So Jaki Gombo Chungyang, Chui Tingu Jingla. So he's saying even if a boat, or is it a boat? A gombo, which is like a thing, like some kind of lump of metal, really. He's saying even a lump of metal, even if it's small, it will sink in the water. Right? Teni Nudu Chipani, Cheong, Tendu Choa Shindu. But if you made it into a vessel, I mean you made it into a boat or whatever, that it will float. Right? You can make the same metal, but in a different shape, and it'll float in the water. So it's saying Mikepa tang kepe chepe dikpa jipa yang chiwa tang namarsude. So it's saying it's similar to unskilled and skilled people, their virtue and their sin, the negativity. In terms of it's just saying I didn't say virtue. The negativity will be that the lightness and heaviness. right? So the point is that a person, generally it's said it's a person who's skilled has much lighter karma. Now, it also says that if a person knows, it's heavier karma. So that might seem contradictory, but the point is, somebody who knows that the consequences of what they're doing and still does it is heavier than if they don't know the consequences. But if a person is skilled, meaning they're really a serious practitioner, then they know how to purify it, so it will be lighter. And so it's similar here, that you both get a lump of metal, but one person knows how to make it into a bow. Then they can actually make it into virtue, right? Something that actually, could be negative, that you can actually turn it into a positive thing, that you learn from your experience and generate more compassion and regret for what you've done, can actually be positive in the long run. So De Yunsini De Chen. So it says the reason for that in the De Chen is the Nyangin Lede Pe Chenpo Do, right? The Mahaparinirvana Sutra. Timuk Chen Drangbu Mar Napala Chawa Jum Hinu Parandrawa. So in the same way that a foolish person is similar to a fly that gets stuck in nasal mucus. It's just a little bit, but you get stuck in it. So Nepa Chungwu Le Kyang Chung Minushing. So even from a small negative deed, they'll be unable to extricate themselves. Gyuse Mepe Gewa Chuminula. So you see, they don't have any regret, so they're not able to do virtue. That's the meaning of Mikepa here, that they don't know how to actually properly manage what they did. It's inevitable we're going to do negative actions. We can't, until we're very advanced, you can't completely avoid it even if you try. So the main point is, what do you do if it happens? How do you manage it? So Kyun Chape Nargigewa Da Gyukyang. So he's saying if you hide your fault, then even if you had virtue before, dikpe mewa chepe na. So even if you did virtue before, but then with non-virtue, mewa, you stain it, I think is the idea. Mewa usually, let's see. I'm thinking it means mole, but that's with the ra, not a sa. Mole, I'm thinking it means like to despise it, but just says defile them. So defile your virtue with your sin, with your negative virtue, negative karma. Tanda number minba nyawe gyuyang. So even now the result of doing that, gyurde will change the result, right? So what was going to be a great result of your virtue is going to be changed. Then nyawe shinduche wa gyuro. So very heavy in hell, the result. Chu nyomo lensa pu gang tatna. So even if in a small glass of water, small water, but you can think a glass of water, lensa puna, if you just add a little bit of salt to a small glass of water, so it's hard to drink. You can't really drink it after you do that. And then shengidong tse chi chapa jel mi pepe jing chak de dunyao nyoma drao ho. Shengidong. I'm thinking, this is an old citrus. So there's a number of, but dong. Dong usually means a ditch, right? But somebody else's ditch. I don't think that's the idea. Oh, I say, yeah, so it is dong say. I first read it as dong. Then I was reading it dong say cheap, but dong say is a coin, right? So it is dong say. So cheap chop, yeah, so that makes more sense. Dong say is one word. You're saying you don't say, so somebody else's coin. Take one of their gold coins out of attachment, and then you bind them up. It's saying, and then do now draw. So Yeah, so the point is that you'll experience incredible suffering just from taking that one coin. In the same way as if you dump salt into the small bit of water, right? So it's a small thing, but because it's because of your mindset, right? So it's saying chapa jim means lupe. So you're saying that you take it without any thought to give it back, right? Jim mi po. And so it's out of it. You borrow. Is this? I think the point is you borrow their coin without the thought of giving it back. So then yang number nge tandagi number mi bayang number bayang wayang nyong bagurde. So there are 5 things that even if the right now the ripening is light, that they will ripen in hell, let's say. So I think the idea is that somebody who does even a small thing now, these 5 kinds of people will have the result will ripen in hell. So Timuk Chen, so a foolish person, right? Somebody who doesn't know how to purify it is the idea. And again, so somebody with little roots of virtue. Right? So roots of virtue usually means that they have a sense of conviction in karma. Or generally just they have a sense of conviction in the consequences of actions, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they believe in the Buddhist view of karma, but just that they have a sense that there's a reason not to do bad things. If you don't, so that sense is very weak. And dikpe lei chiwata, or if it's a very heavy, or they generally have very heavy negative karma, right? Then they do more. It's even this little thing, it's still a lot. Gyud sang machepatang, and they don't have much regret for what they do. Top margeo michepo, or they haven't ever done virtue to begin with. Like they had nothing to support for them. Shesumpe, namala gyubatang, chima dobatang, dibamisangshing. So you have you don't, or something. It's negated. So you don't have regret for what you did before. You don't have the intention to restrain yourself again. You haven't purified your karma. So it's saying, okay. It is saying for the person who is actually skilled, right, that they do regret it, and they tend to guard themselves again. Right? They don't hide their karma, their negativity, right? They don't keep it secret. And they practice virtue as a remedy, then it will be quite light what they did. Dedak michepr kizigigone so, but people who don't do that, so they don't regret it and so forth, and they kisu means to like denigrate it. So they say this doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. There's no problem with doing this stupid rule. If you rule against it, you're a monk, and you say this is a silly rule. I don't take it seriously. Then she shindu jupe kipper lompalani. So those people who intentionally do it, right, know what they're doing, and they do it, they enter into it. These people who are conceited of being scholars, or just masters, right? They're conceited of being skilled. It's very heavy. Yeah, there's something else I was going to say here, but I forget. So, Rinpoche Pumpule Kyang. So from the heap of jewels, this is another sutra. Teng Sungi Semchen Tamche, or Tong Sungi Semchen Tamche, all the 3 beings in the trichiolocosm, the threefold world systems, right? Which Tong Sum means 3 to the 1,000 to the 3rd power. Yeah. So billion, billionfold world system. Tekshen Lashukte, if they all were to enter into the Mahayana, Korgegi Gyasiran Dempa, Rerekyang, so even all of them had the power of a wheel turning king, and each one of them, Marme Nu, Gyatso Samlan, Marme Sangiki Chudin Chupale, so even if all the if every one of them then offered to the Buddha all the butter lamps the size of Mount Meru, with wicks the size of Mount Meru, and with the so the vessel, right? So you have the butter lamp and you have the cup in which how do you call the top part of the lamp where you put the oil. If that was the size of the ocean, Zhangzhen Kimne Zhongwei Marme Ningpo. Marme Ningpo Drumargi Kubachuding Tungru Zimbe Sonangi Gai Charyam Mipubu. So then, but a bodhisattva who has gone forth from the householder's life, so it means a monastic bodhisattva. So this is talking about, the advantages of being a monastic, right? You'll sometimes see this. I mean, it's actually somewhat of an odd time to talk about this, right? There's other sections of the Lam Rim where he talks about the advantage of ordination. But here it's saying that, so if all the bodhisattvas are wheel-turning kings, compared to one bodhisattva who was a renunciate, who was a monastic, and they even just offer a little bit of a butter lamp that's been smeared with oil, and the wick has been smeared with oil, then the merit will be so much more. It won't be able to be challenged by the merit of all those wheel-turning kings. Dini Sampa Jamdiki Semtang Shingla Kimeching Nubula Kepu Shindu Cheong Dengi Topsu Selo. So he's saying the other three of the three strong things are very strong, right? So the intention is very strong. It's bodhisattva. The field is no different from the two. They're both offering to the Buddha. The object also is no different. They're both offering the butter lamps, but the difference is the basis. So it's the vow that they've taken. So de rikpe donghome batang yubatang yubalayang chik den tang ni den sun dengi dengi lang gombayang Namangama nam le chima chima nam sachu chewa silshin. So he's saying with this logic from what they're teaching here, that you can understand that the difference between somebody who doesn't have vows versus one who does. One who has them, but one who has only one vow, or two vows, or three vows. All of them increasingly more, the meditation on the path will be so much more profound, much clearer. It's clearer that it will be so much better, so much more powerful than the previous ones. So Kimpa Tabu Jin Tongwala Sopa. Chebetseyang. So even when a lay person, right, the merit that they get from this giving, Niene Drawe Dompatong Dempingang Ne Chipatong. Right, so the merit that they get when they're staying in the near abiding, right? So they take 1 day vows, right? Lay people can take 1 day vows of celibacy and other things. So they get more merit if they do it that way. If they practice generosity with those vows. Dopumepa chipeni, so the people who do not have the vows, gets a top chiching shindu chewer selo. So it's very clear also that there's a very difference in the degree of the strength of their virtue. Sultram Chawa Sachibedole. So also in the sutra that is how could we translate this? The sutra that is I guess refuting people who have broken ethics is probably the nicest way to say it. So it's saying the disadvantages of having broken ethics. Migi chu tang dempe mishik gundu barche mepar lo gyai baru dikasapale. So a person who for 100 years they accumulate non-virtue without break, a person who has the 10 non-virtues. Getso sutram rewe trongsangi gyatsangi yopne. But then even more so than that person with all the non-virtues for so long, then the gelong, the monk who, it's like the same word I mentioned about yarn, they rip. I mean, they tear their ethics. They've broken their ethics. If even so, they clothe themselves in religious garments, right? Trongsangi gyatsan. The victory signs of a monastic or of a sage. I mean, actually, sage here is talking about the Buddha's victory signs. The point is the Buddhist robes. Depe jimbala shakchi longchena. So if even for one day they make use of the things that have been offered with faith. Migewa chemo or sumwayang. It's said to be that much more non-virtue. Dengi gone dikpatop chewa. So he's saying again, this is a result of the difference in terms of their basis. Right, so this is the person who has taken monastic vows but has broken them. Right, so we talked before, but this section is interesting. It's about the basis. It started with this talk about people who are skilled and unskilled, right? Didn't go directly into talking about the basis, but I think the understanding then is that the basis is not just the vows; it's the person doing it, right? Then usually that's what basis means, right? So whether they're monastic or not, or whether they're skilled or not, or whether they have such and such other qualifications. So it depends very much on who's doing the action in terms of how heavy it is. So likewise in the Lungnamche, right, the Vinaya Vibhanga. Jakbon Meche Barwa Da Super Gyurwa Chok Yingi. Similar wording to before. So it's saying it's superior to eat a flaming heap of metal than to sulche yana midonpe yukor sonyom sawami. So it's superior to eat a lump of fiery metal than for a person who, a monastic with broken vows, who's not guarding themselves, to go about in the countryside taking alms. So Basakapa is saying here that in the sutra, it's actually explained that it's two people. It's the person who has the broken ethics, but also one who is lax in the discipline. So this is the other one, right, the lazy monks. So Dompa Rinpoche Sune, so also in the speech, the teachings of Don Tompa, right? Chöbe Tempe Dikpe Gamni, Gamna, so he's saying in the Migewa Chu Dikpa Dru Yinsung. So he's saying in the presence of, like Gam is like in front of, right? So in front of the present, like in compared to is really the point. The non-virtue of a person which is based on the non-virtue in the relation to the Dharma, then the non-virtue of the 10 non-virtues is insignificant. In Sungde, Mipernang Ho. So he's saying that appears to be true. Right? So it depends on the base. I mean that is we're talking about the person here. So it must be a religious person, a person who makes a claim to be a religious practitioner, but is actually creating non-virtue. And we can think about that also in the world, right? How much harm is if a monk was to do something really serious? We've seen this in the news sometimes when these really bad things happen. It's extremely harmful, right? There's people who murder people, and it doesn't always. It's not usually in the news actually, but it's not a big story. But if a monk did it, then it would be a very big story. Right? It would have a lot of harmful effects just in this life and for the Sangha as a whole, and for all kinds of things, for people's faith, for people. I think even more subtly, it would have the negativity that people would start to think, yeah, nobody is really any better than anyone else. Everybody is just stuck in the same situation. Nobody is free of delusion. It's just a fantasy that these monks have, because they see that we see monks behaving this way. This is a very important thing to think about here. We're representing the Sangha, and if we don't appear to be any different than anyone else, then people won't. It's very possible they'll fall into nihilism. They'll have the idea that there's really nothing better than just ordinary life and what ordinary people do. So there's all kinds of negative effects that can come from that.
But for example, if you start to pretend that you're different from the others or is more spiritual than others, also you cannot, I can say, you're at the same level of them.
Yeah.
You feel like untouchable, you know. You feel like, oh,
Yeah.
this monk is untouchable, and I cannot talk with him and so on because you feel so spiritual and you pretend to be so
Yeah,
spiritual
yeah,
and
yeah.
so forth. There is this level also because
Well,
it's
yeah,
everywhere and all the same.
so there's a couple of things, there's two ways to answer your question. One is that it depends, like, it doesn't mean that you should not do what other people do, like be friendly, right? I was saying more in terms of like killing, you shouldn't say like, I'm gonna go around killing because everyone else does it, so I should do it too, right? But also, other things I've said, we talked about this last night, that you should find out, addicted mate girpakun, tonan chide pomar cha, right? So find out what kind of things, check, say, observe, and then ask what kind of things cause people to lose faith, and don't do those things. Right, so as I've said, around here, you have to know what kind of things, listen to, sometimes you'll get that. So I've sometimes had, you can take that as very educational. You get in a rickshaw and the driver starts telling you about things they don't like about the monks, and you know what kind of things people don't like about monks. So it's good not to do those kinds of things. Right? Now, regarding the second point, there is the skillful means as the bodhisattva that you can try to, there's a way of relating to people, of getting involved in their activities. Now we see that in the case of some, very, it's not so much in the Gelug, but we see that sometimes in the Kagyu and the Nyingma especially, where there are lay lamas who get very involved in lay activities. And in some cases, it may not be that they're so enlightened in some cases, and then they end up becoming, getting big scandals. But in some cases, they might really be, very enlightened beings who are doing that as a skillful means to reach people in a way they wouldn't be able to do if they were in a form where they're separated from them, right? People don't, they think, oh, he's a Tibetan lama, and they just think that's their culture and we can't be like that. But if it's seen to be very much within our culture, but that's in the Bodhisattva vows. There's a lot of talk about how to do that skillfully. To be very careful with that. So there's all these checks and balances, and you have to look at these different things, right? You can break the monastic vows in certain cases, but you have to know the right time to do so. You have to know your own ability, your own qualifications, right? Because that's a big danger. That's an even heavier thing within the Bodhisattva vows, is that you think, well, I don't need to keep the monastic vows, well, because I'm a Bodhisattva practitioner, and I can just, I'm acting out of skillful means. But the monastic vows are, for a large extent, there to help you subdue your own mind. And so, if you just disregard those, right, then you'll end up, as I said, being one of the ones who gets into scandal, right? That's sometimes that happens. That maybe even they're very sincere at the beginning, but if you start breaking the boundaries, then it can be problematic. I've tried to use the example before, but I went to research and I couldn't find anything. It would be good if someone can research this for me and tell me, because my teacher told me this in college, but I would like to see a real clear source for it before I actually say it anymore in public teaching, because I have mentioned it once, but I realized I really don't know the source. Which is that when the Indian monks first came to China, because that was we could talk about a very skillful means. It was very hard to convert the Chinese people to Buddhism, or at least, and convert is not the right word, but to get them interested because the Chinese people were not really interested in Indian culture. They thought their culture was superior. So there were monks that traveled up to China, and so anyway, my teacher in college anyway told me that they drank alcohol when they got there, because the people they didn't take them seriously if they didn't relate to them in that way. And that it was actually effective in the long run. That eventually monks in China became much more strict, but at the beginning it was a very skillful means to help people to relate to them and take them seriously. So it could be. But anyway, I don't know. It would be good to actually see that in print, or see kind of source for that, rather than remembering what my teacher said in school. But I do remember him saying that, and I don't think he was making it up. So. Yeah, but I haven't, looking for it anyway, I didn't find anything about it. But so that happens, right? But also, you have to be pretty advanced to do that, right? It's good to learn the rules well, right? And then you know when is a good time. When you don't just like not know the rules and then just do whatever you feel like. You know exactly. You're very conscious of what you're doing, overstepping the boundaries, but you know what a monk should and shouldn't do in a normal situation, right? It's a long-term practice to get used to that. Right? That's why it's generally recommended for younger monks just stay in the monastery. It's not, don't just spend a lot of time trying to go out and impress the lay people. But as someone is more stable in the practice, that's the main point. You're stable enough that doing that is not going to disturb your own practice, disturb your own mind. And so I think the original point you're making of just being relatable, right? It depends on the extent to which you take that, right? So being relatable by swearing like everybody else, I think you're also likely to offend quite a few people by doing that if you're a monastic, but being relatable by not being standoffish or not acting like I'm special, that's probably a good idea. That's it's chill, right? That's one of the 5 wrong livelihoods, right? Is to make this air of being a great practitioner, so that people make offerings to you. So don't try to make a conscious effort to make it look like you're a good practitioner, but it should be obvious. People will see that you're practicing by the way you behave and the way that they can see that your sincerity. It doesn't have to be that you speak the Queen's English or something like that. So then, mopo gone top chewa. So then, heavy in terms of the thing that you're giving, right? Or the object, whatever the object is. So semchen la jimpa tongwala chigi jimpa. So among things that are giving the sentient beings, it's giving dharma, giving them dharma teachings. Sangye chipa la jupe chipa. So then the best offering to the Buddha is the offering of your practice. Sang singi jimpa tong chipa le che pudu jumane. So he's saying above, more than those two. So among sentient beings, teaching the dharma is much superior to giving them requisites. And offering your practice to the Buddha is much superior to making physical offerings, offering food or whatever, money. So he's saying based on that, you can know the rest of it. I think I told you before that quote by Milarepa, right? Without exquisite offerings, but what is it? This is the way to put it in verse. Anyway, I don't remember how I put it in verse at one point, but I'm not getting something in my mind. But basically the point is, with no exquisite offerings by practicing, the Father Lama's servant pays him back. Right? So Milarepa is saying that he didn't have anything to offer. He was very poor, destitute, but he's saying his Father Lama, his Marpa, the way he offered back to him was to practice, which is saying here that's a superior offering to the teacher than to just give them gifts. So then sampe goni topche wani. So then it's very heavy in the karma in terms of the intention. So Rinpoche Pompole, so the same sutra about the heap of jewels. Tongsen, so yeah, it talks about here again the tricholikism. Threefold world system, as I said, means billion worlds. Tongsengi semchen tamche susune sangi chudin rirapsam chila. So somebody who give or towards Mount Meru of stupas of the Buddha from all of the worlds of the sentient beings. Right, for each individually. Deralayam, Kaprachewa Nidu, so for just that many aeons, Tating du Chawala, Titang du Chawala, Tamjigi Titang Chipale, Jangzengi Tamche Kempe Sem Tamadrawe. Medok Chitsan Dorwa Soramo. Okay, so Ding-dong, I'm not remembering. I think it has to do with an offering. But it's saying that if all the sentient beings, so it's from all the sentient beings in all the world systems, if they offer to the Buddha, heap to the stupa of the Buddha, the heaps, they're just like Mount Meru for that many aeons. Then a bodhisattva who has the mind of full enlightenment, right, meaning they intend to become a Buddha, they're not divorced from the mind. It's saying then they just scatter one flower. There's that much more merit in doing so. Sumde. Dejindu. So he says, then Tsongkhapa is adding, or he's just saying I think he's filling in with later in the sutra. Topcha chok men la mikbatang rang shengi dona mikbala sope sambe kipratang. Deang shukjak shentang. Yun ring tung so kikone sheprachao. So he's saying it's similar in terms of something to be achieved which is superior or inferior, or in terms of the object that you're in terms of what you're observing, right? So you're doing the action with a superior, like the thought of full enlightenment, versus the thought you're observing that I'm just going to do this for a better rebirth or whatever other reason. And then ram jigidoma mikbala sope, or in terms of your own or somebody other's benefit, right? So you're only thinking of your own benefit, or you're thinking of the benefit of many. Sambe kipartam. And also he's saying then chukjak shentang. So then also with strong or weak intention, right? Or gyang ring tung sungi gone, or for gyun ring tung sungi gone, so for a long or a short period of time. He's saying all of those in terms of the the power of the result. Nicholayang nyobe samba shukjak batang gyun ring batok chela. So also for negative actions, so it's saying the same thing. He's talking about giving, the first one was talking about the positive actions, giving. So we're doing the same thing in terms of the negative actions, very strong afflictions that are motivating you. Saying among all of those, anger is the heaviest. So it says in Shunju, right? This is in the beginning of the 6th chapter on patience, right? Kalpa tongdu sapahi de nadeje chola so like gangi dera de kunkyang kongto shiki jompa. Right, so for merit that you've accumulated for 1,000 aeons from giving and from offering to the Buddhas, Sujatas, then all that greatness, the goodness that you've done, it can be destroyed in an instant of anger. She so. Deang sampa sumpe chopatang dele kyang gyalsila churwani shinduchi de. So he's saying also anger towards somebody who's practicing celibacy, right, a monastic, or even to a bodhisattva, even more so. So in the Samadhi, the King of Samadhi Sutra, Chikla chikyam nosem chena ni. So if one bodhisattva is in mind of harm to another one, de la sultram tube kyut minu. So this person, their ethical discipline and their learning cannot liberate them from that, right? Santemi kyo. So they can't be liberated by their concentration. Or gune kyut minu. It's by abiding in the wilderness, meaning by staying in retreat. They can't free themselves. So they can't free themselves by generosity or by offering to the Buddha. It's very heavy action. Shetang chunjukle. So again, in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. Kanshi denne gyalsa jindagla gyaldingen se kepe chepe de and some kepe chongchin gyalperni na wani pekir shetupe sum. Right, so that's from the first chapter, right, about the benefits of bodhicitta. Right, so he's saying somebody who gets angry at such a bodhisattva, right? So he's talking about the benefits of bodhicitta, but he's saying with that incredibly powerful mind, and somebody who out of anger or generates a negative mind towards them, then for as many moments as they generated a negative mind, then for that many moments they will abide in hell. The Buddha says, he's saying. But of course he says right after that, what is it? So the it's the corollary of that. He's saying, although But if you generate positive mind towards them, it will have that much benefit. But then he also says, even if you do something very harmful to a bodhisattva, it won't harm you, it will benefit you, and it'll increase. Well, the point is that, so even though the ripened result is going to be very heavy, because it is a very heavy action, actually in the long run you will benefit, because you'll make a connection with the bodhisattva. Let's talk about that in the sutras often. Right? So, because the bodhisattva has the intention to benefit, that's what's so amazing about bodhicittas. Even if somebody harms them, in the long run they will be benefited from that connection. There's a story I've heard. There was a bodhisattva who went to a town. I think it must be in a sutra. I didn't see it in the sutra. I think Venerable Rabina talked about it, and then I heard about it later. But I assume she got it from a sutra, or maybe Lam Rim told her. So the bodhisattva went to a town, and he wanted to make a connection with everyone in the town, so that in the future lifetime he could benefit them. And then there was one old woman who was very, very muksantopo, right? Didn't want to interact with people. They sort of closed off, locked herself in her house. So the bodhisattva couldn't meet her and make a connection with her. So he took his horse and trampled her garden, and she came out and screamed at him, and he ran away. He looked at her and he went away. But it said that the purpose of that was that doing that was just to make that connection, to get her to come out of the house, to make that connection, that in the long run, he would actually be able to benefit her. So it's something to think about, right? We don't want to go trampling people's gardens, right? But
in order to do that, you have to have bodhicitta first.
Well, yeah, it's a bodhisattva, right? But the point is that if you have a positive motivation, right, you want to make connections with people, kind of what you were saying. You don't, even if it sometimes means taking unusual means to do so, right? So there's another very interesting story. It's not quite the same theme, but there's not the same moral of the story, but it's quite nice to reflect upon. And it's a good book. I was actually going to offer this book to Lama Rinpoche at some point, but I can't remember why I didn't. I guess I was embarrassed to do so. The Wisdom of the Desert is by Thomas Merton. You read that? Yeah. It's the Desert Fathers. They were the early Christian monks. So it's a bunch of stories of them that he collected. So there's one. They were known as being very austere practitioners. There's a lot of interesting stories about them. And I wanted to offer it to Rinpoche because it reminded me a lot of the Kadama stories, Kada masters, and so I thought Rinpoche might like it. But it's all about mind training, and they're trained in how they don't train themselves not to get angry. So there's a story of two brothers who were monks, and they were staying in a retreat. So one more senior monk came to their place, and he asked them, if they were meditating and so forth, if they were practicing well, and they said, they've been practicing for such and such time, but they're very humble. But he wanted to test them because they had a vegetable garden that they didn't. It was the only sustenance they had. So he went to their vegetable garden with his staff and thrashed everything, and they just sat there patiently looking at him. And there was just one piece of cabbage left, and when they finished, they just held. They looked at their piece of cabbage and they said, "Now let's make dinner together." He invited them in. So he said he was impressed. He said he realized that they were actually practicing well. And that's a little different theme, but the point is not to get too attached to the physical things, right? It's done. It's over. I sometimes remember that story when people thrash our garden. Take a long time trying to plant these things for years, and sometimes it's what happens. It's the nature of things. Once it's done, it's done. You can't do anything about it. So, okay. Anyone have questions? Or on the chat, maybe? There's no questions in the chat so far. If anyone has a question on Siki asked, she can tell she's asking one, so we know. If not, then we'll just continue with the. with the dedication.
So no questions. No questions so far. No. Sa ji bu yi zhong ji me do zhang ji ra li ji ni de gen ba li san yi ji du me de wu wa yi zhou yun nam da xin la ju wer shu ji san li wu zi ra de qin nam gar tin li zhou ju ri fa dang lu zan ten bi zhong mi sa sun yi zhou yi mu si ta ge ni gir ji yi da guru ra ta min da la kam ni sha ta ya mi. For my typical actions,
The space that I've amassed from working with ethics practice for a bit length of time, may I become a chief fitting Buddha for all those whose minds of wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. If I have not reached this state, may I be held in loving compassion for all my lives of Manjushri. May I find grace to create good paths of teachings. May I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, clear the darkness from the minds of all beings, the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I behold Buddha teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion, whatever direction the most teachings seems have not yet spread or once spread have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted boundless peace, and the Buddha's aids in ours for a very long time. By it we created a path to enlightenment completed through the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings who limited at adversity and great conditions for practice excellent paths ever be in their lives the purest paths praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes an effort to act in accordance with tenfold Maya and virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones. May oceans of prosperity spread everywhere.
Don't know how to stop.